I am Mira, 31 years old. For years, I told myself my older sister, Sable, was just difficult. Strong personality. Sharp tongue. The kind of person you had to handle with care. But that Christmas Eve, at my mother's house in Cedar Glen, a quiet suburb outside Port Ashton, I learned the truth. Sable wasn't difficult. She was cruel. And she chose a family dinner as her stage. Before we get into it, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. If you've ever dealt with a toxic relative who always ruins special moments, drop a hi in the comments so I know I'm not alone. It started when Sable arrived 90 minutes early. She never arrived early. Sable was the kind of woman who treated time like a servant. If she showed up ahead of schedule, it meant she wanted control before everyone else walked in. I was in the kitchen with my mom, ESI, lifting the foil off a pan of sweet yam bake when I heard the click-click of heels on hardwood. Loud, deliberate, like an announcement. Well, well, Sable sang out, dragging the words. Look who actually showed up this year. I wiped my hands on my apron and swallowed the irritation that rose like bile. My 5-year-old son, Teo, was in the living room pushing toy trucks through an imaginary snowstorm made of cotton balls. He had on a red sweater with a blinking star that made him look like pure joy. My husband, Noel, walked behind me with grocery bags and squeezed my shoulder, his quiet way of saying, "Don't let her drag you down." "Hi, Sable," I said neutral. "Merry Christmas." Sable's eyes swept me from head to toe, that old familiar inspection, like she was searching for something to mock. A man stood beside her holding an expensive bottle of wine and wearing a coat that still had the tag string tucked in. I'd seen that look before, the look of a man who thought he'd won a prize, not realizing he was standing too close to a storm. Mom rushed in, bright smile shaking at the edges. "Sable, you're early. The roast won't be ready for a while." "I wanted quality time with my family," Sable said, her eyes still pinned to me. "All my family." There it was, the little blade in the sentence. Sable had always spoken like that. Everything was layered. Everything had a sting hidden under the sugar. Growing up, she was the golden child. The family's first sparkle. The one teachers praised, neighbors admired, relatives bragged about. I wasn't invisible, but I was always the other one. The one who should be grateful. I did become grateful, just not to her. I got my certification, found steady work in healthcare, built a calm life with Noel, and created a home where laughter didn't come with conditions. We didn't have luxury, but we had peace. And Sable hated that peace because she couldn't control it. "Teo, come say hi to your aunt," I called gently, trying to keep things normal. My son ran in, face bright, shoes squeaking on the floor. "Hi, Annie Sable," he said with a wide grin that could melt ice. Sable barely looked at him. "Hello," she replied, like she was greeting a cashier. It stung, but I was used to being stung. What I wasn't used to was her warming up like she'd been waiting all day to start a fire. "Still living in that small house you posted last month?" she asked, tapping her nails against her phone. "Must be hard not having family money to fall back on." Noel's jaw tightened. "We own our place." Sable blinked slowly, then smiled. "Oh, how modest." The house filled up as evening came. My dad tunned, walked in smelling like cold air and peppermint. Aunt Romy brought pie. Uncle Gabe carried a casserole and a loud laugh. My cousin Lenny arrived with a tin of cookies and nervous eyes. The noise of family almost drowned Sable's poison, but not completely. She kept slipping comments in like needles, about my job, my clothes, my little life. Teo helped set the table, carefully placing forks the way I showed him. He leaned close and whispered, "Mommy, why doesn't Annie Sable smile?" I knelt and kissed his forehead. "Some people forget how, baby. It's not your fault." But deep down, I knew it wasn't forgetfulness. It was jealousy dressed as superiority. Sable couldn't stand that Noel loved me quietly, consistently, without drama. She couldn't stand that Teo was happy. She couldn't stand that my life didn't need her permission. Dinner finally hit the table. Roast, greens, mac and cheese, cornbread, everything warm and fragrant. Mom insisted we hold hands for grace. Teo's palm was slightly sticky from the candy cane he'd been sneaking. Noel's hand was steady and warm on my other side. I squeezed back like an anchor. For the first 15 minutes, it was almost nice. Stories, laughter, Uncle Gabe joking too loudly, Lenny smiling at Teo's silly faces. Then Sable set her fork down slowly. "So, Mira," she said, voice sweet and loud enough to catch everyone's attention. "How's that hospital job? Still doing the unpleasant work?" "I'm on the recovery unit," I said evenly. I like helping people heal. How noble, she purred. I just got upgraded to senior lead at my firm. Bigger office, higher pay, travel benefits. Some of us don't settle. Noel's fork clinked against his plate. Mira doesn't settle. She serves. Sable's eyes flashed. Serving is what people say when they can't win. I felt my mother's gaze begging. Please, not tonight. Dad stared at his plate like he wished it would open and swallow him. Then Sable turned her eyes toward my son. Teo is 5 now, right? She asked. Yes, I answered, my stomach tightening. And you and Noel have been married. How long? She asked, smiling like she already knew the answer. For years, Noel said. Sable leaned back, eyebrows rising. For years married. 5-year-old child. She tapped her nails. Interesting math. The table went quiet. Even the Christmas music in the background suddenly sounded too loud. Sable, I warned, voice low. She ignored me. In our family, she said, we always believed in doing things properly. The right way. The moral way. Her gaze slid toward Noel, then back to me. But I guess not everyone cares. My heart started pounding. I knew that gleam. That gleam meant she had chosen a target, and she was about to shoot. When do we admit, Sable continued, that some people had children first, and then forced marriage to clean it up? She turned to the room, enjoying every face. When do we say what it is? Mom's lips trembled. Sable, please. Sable smiled, cold, satisfied. Fine. I'll say it. Teo is illegitimate. The word landed like a slap. Teo looked up at me with innocent confusion. Mommy, what does that mean? And in that moment, my entire world narrowed to my son's face, hurt trying to form before he even understood why. Time didn't move right after that. It felt thick, like the air turned to syrup. I stared at my son, at the way his mouth struggled around a word he'd never needed to know. He didn't understand the insult, but he understood the temperature in the room. How laughter had died, how shoulders stiffened, how faces tightened. It's nothing, baby, I said quickly, voice cracking. It's a mean word, and Auntie Sable shouldn't have said it. Sable lifted her chin. Don't sugarcoat it, Mira. The boy deserves the truth. Noel shot up so fast his chair scraped hard against the floor. You do not speak about my son like that. Sable's eyes narrowed. Your son, she repeated, like she was tasting the words. We all know the timeline. You married her after. Enough, Mom whispered, tears already spilling. Please, it's Christmas. Sable waved a hand. Christmas doesn't make lies holy. The table erupted. Aunt Romy gasped. Uncle Gabe started shouting. My cousin Lenny's eyes went wide like a deer's. My dad still didn't move, frozen in that old habit of watching conflict like it was a storm he could outwait. Teo's eyes began to shine with tears, not because he understood the accusation, but because the love around him had turned into noise and fire. And then my mind flashed backward, like a door ripped open. 6 years earlier, I had been pregnant and alone. The man I was dating back then, Bren, promised me everything until the test turned positive. After that, he vanished. Blocked my number. Changed apartments. Disappeared like smoke. I had cried on my bathroom floor until my ribs hurt, terrified that I'd ruined my life. Noel came back into my world around that time, an old friend from school who moved into town for work. When he found out I was pregnant and abandoned, he didn't flinch. He showed up. He brought groceries. He sat with me at appointments. He listened when I talked myself into panic. He held my hand in the delivery room when Teo arrived screaming and perfect. 2 months after Teo was born, Noel looked at me and said, I don't care who made him. I want to be his father. If you'll let me. We got married when Teo was 1. Noel adopted him legally. On paper and in practice, Noel became his father in every way that mattered. Teo called him Daddy with his whole heart. Noel earned it every day. Sable knew that story. Not because I told her, because my mother, in her weakness, had confided it one day. And Sable had stored it away like a weapon. Now she was swinging it at my child. Noel's voice shook with rage. You want to talk about morals? You're attacking a 5-year-old. Sable shrugged. Words don't kill people. Reality does. Teo sniffed, lower lip wobbling. Mommy, he whispered, and my chest cracked. That's when my son did something I still can't explain. He sat up straighter, wiped his face with the back of his sleeve, and looked directly at Sable. His voice came out clear, careful, like he was repeating something important. Annie Sable, he said. Everyone froze. He continued, innocent and steady. Daddy says you have 3 kids with 3 men you never married. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the refrigerator hum. Sable's face drained of color, not pale, empty. Like somebody unplugged her. "What did you say?" she whispered. Teo blinked. "Daddy told me," he added, almost apologetic, like he thought he was helping. "When I asked why my cousins have different last names. Daddy said you have Naya with Mr. Dax and Corin with Mr. Jules and baby Remy with Mr. Kent. And you didn't marry them." Noel's eyes widened, then he looked at me and gave the smallest shrug. The kind of shrug that said, he asked. I answered simply. Sable's boyfriend, his name might have been Mason, turned slowly to look at her. His smile had evaporated. 3 kids, he said quietly. You told me one. You told me her dad passed away. Sable's mouth opened, then closed. It's complicated. Mason took a step back. Is it complicated, or is it a lie? Uncle Gabe let out a low whistle. Aunt Romy covered her mouth. Lenny's eyes grew even bigger. Sable's chair screeched as she stood up, fury and panic colliding. You had no right to tell a child my private business. Noel's voice was sharp as a blade. And you had no right to shame my son at this table. My dad finally found his voice. Okay. Everyone calm down. No, I said, standing up so fast my knees trembled. I put my hands on Teo's shoulders, grounding him. No more calming down. We've been calming down for years while she hurts people. Mom sobbed openly. Mira, please, she's your sister. She stopped being my sister the moment she aimed that word at my child. I said, voice shaking but strong. Do you understand what she did? She tried to make him feel unwanted. Like he didn't belong. Sable tried to regain her mask. I was stating facts. Facts. I laughed once, bitter. You want facts? Here's one. Noel is here. Noel chose us. Noel has loved my son every single day. That's what family looks like. Mason took another step back, face hard. I'm leaving, he said. I don't do surprises like this. Sable's eyes widened. Mason, wait. But he was already walking away, coat over his arm, wine bottle still on the table like he'd forgotten why he carried it. The front door opened and closed. The house felt smaller. Noel gently lifted Teo into his arms. Buddy, he said softly, let's go look at the lights outside for a minute, okay? But I want dessert, Teo sniffled. We'll have it later, Noel promised and carried him out. Then it was just us, adults, exposed, no child to hide behind. I faced Sable. You've spent my whole life stepping on me. Sable scoffed, but her voice was thin now. Oh, please. When I got my job, you called it small. When I bought my house, you called it cheap. When I built a family, you searched for dirt under the floorboards because you couldn't stand that I was happy. Mom whispered, Mira. No, Mom. My voice hardened. You asked me to be the bigger person for years. You protected her tantrums like they were storms we had to endure. But she doesn't get to destroy my son and walk away clean. Aunt Romy stood up. I'm done pretending too, she said, eyes on Sable. You're a bully. Uncle Gabe nodded. We all know it. Even Lenny spoke, voice trembling. Auntie Sable, you ruined my birthday last year because you said my dress looked cheap. I cried in the bathroom. Sable stared around the table, finally seeing a room full of people who were no longer afraid of her. But instead of remorse, she gave us a bitter smile. So I'm the villain, she said. Fine. And I realized something chilling. Sable didn't feel sorry. She only felt caught. Sable grabbed her purse like it was a shield. Her hands were shaking, but her pride fought to stand tall. You all want to gang up on me? She snapped. Go ahead. Mira has always been weak. She got abandoned, got pregnant, and then trapped the first man who showed her attention. You call it love. I call it desperation. For a second, I felt that old familiar sting. The childhood wound of being told I wasn't enough. But then something inside me shifted. Not into sadness. Into clarity. I exhaled slowly. You're right about one thing, I said, and my voice came out calm, dangerously calm. I was desperate back then. I was scared, alone, and humiliated. Mom's sobbing quieted. Dad lifted his head. And do you know what you did when you found out? I continued, eyes locked on Sable's. You laughed. I called you crying and you laughed. You said, well, you made your bed. Mom gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Sable. Sable's eyes flickered, but she didn't deny it. She only scoffed, like cruelty was a flex. That's who you are, I said. You kick people when they're down because you're terrified of being down yourself. Sable's mouth tightened. Spare me the therapy talk. Oh, we're past therapy, Uncle Gabe muttered. Aunt Romy stepped closer to me. Linda, she addressed my mom. You and Tund let this go on too long. Dad flinched at his name, guilt creeping into his face. I didn't know it was this bad. Yes, you did, Aunt Romy said bluntly. You just preferred silence over conflict. The room went still again, not the shocked silence from earlier, but the heavy, truthful kind. The kind that makes people face themselves. Sable's eyes darted toward the doorway like she was calculating escape. I stepped forward, not threatening, just firm. Before you leave, I said, I need you to understand something. You tried to stamp my son with shame. You tried to make him feel like he was less than. Sable's voice cracked, but she forced it back into sharpness. I didn't try to. You did, I cut in. And you did it on Christmas, at the table, in front of people who are supposed to protect him. Then my voice softened, and somehow that softness felt sharper. Teo is going to grow up knowing he's loved. Noel chooses him every day. That's what real fathers do. Sable's face twitched. Oh, so now you're Mother of the Year. No, I said. I'm just a mother who finally stopped swallowing poison. Mom's shoulders shook. Mira, I'm sorry, she whispered, voice broken. I'm sorry I kept asking you to be the bigger person. I looked at her and felt years of pain settle into one clear truth. Being the bigger person shouldn't mean being the softer target, I said. Sable's eyes shone with angry tears now. You think you're better than me? I nodded once. Yes. The room inhaled. Sable's mouth opened in disbelief. You. Not because I'm married, I said steady. Not because of my job. Not because of my house. I'm better than you because I don't attack children to feel powerful. Sable made a sound, half laugh, half sob. You're all ridiculous. Maybe, Uncle Gabe said. But we're done. Sable looked at Mom, waiting, maybe for comfort, maybe for rescue. But Mom didn't move. She just cried quietly, like she finally understood that loving one child didn't mean sacrificing the other. Sable's pride cracked. She snatched her coat and marched to the door. Her heels hit the floor too fast now, no longer an announcement, more like a retreat. The door slammed. A few seconds later, we heard her car start and roar away into the night. The air changed immediately, like a storm had left the room. Noel came back inside holding Teo, who had red cheeks from the cold and a serious expression like he'd been thinking hard. Are we having dessert now? Teo asked, wiping his nose. I dropped to my knees and opened my arms. He ran into me, and I held him tight, breathing in the warm scent of his hair. Yes, baby, I whispered. We're having dessert. Teo looked around. Is Annie Sable gone? I swallowed. Yes. He nodded once, small and certain. Good. She was mean. That simple sentence broke me more than any insult Sable ever threw. Because children know. They feel it. Even when they don't have the vocabulary. We ate pie. We opened gifts. We sang carols, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was bracing for impact. My mother sat beside me later while we cleaned dishes. I failed you, she whispered. I always protected her because she was loud, and you were quiet. I thought you could handle it. I handled it, I said gently. But I shouldn't have had to. 3 months later, Sable sent a message. No apology, just paragraphs explaining why she was misunderstood. I deleted it. No reply. No argument. Just peace. Over time, I heard she moved to another city, taking one child and leaving the others with relatives and fathers. That's her story to fix, not mine to rescue. What I know is this: boundaries are not hate. They are protection. And sometimes the best gift you can give your child is showing them that respect is non-negotiable, even when the disrespect comes from family. If this story touched you, please like, comment, and subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to protect your peace or your child? Drop your experience in the comments.